are in week 2 of our series that we're calling Parenting Today. And so I don't know, some of you may be here because you're like, I need all of the help I can get. Our family is just dysfunctional and I just, we need help. And so if that's you, I just want to give you some encouragement because every family has a little bit of dysfunction in them. There's not a family anywhere in the world that you're going to find where if you were to open up their doors and kind of spend some time, you find out that they're not dysfunctional. Everybody has a little bit of dysfunction, especially when you read the Bible. When you read the stories and you look at families, there's actually very few families that serve as great examples. Even great guys like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, when you read their stories, it's like, man, there's some crazy stuff going on, right? And so we live in a crazy world, and so we're all in this together. And so the great thing is that through all of our dysfunction, through all of our mess, guess what? God is still faithful, and God can work through our dysfunction and through our mess. And so I just want to encourage you to not give up, to keep going. And so really, we started last week with this idea, with the principle that we need to begin with the end in mind. And what we mean by that is that 100 years from now, your child, their life is going to be over. And they're going to stand before God one day and give an account for their life. And so it's looking at the end and saying, okay, what can I do to make sure that my child has a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Because that's really where it starts, is that we want our children to grow up and to love the Lord with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind, with all of our strength, right? I mean, we want them to love them. And that's kind of the center point of what it means to be a Christian parent, a disciple-making parent, is that the fact that we love God, and that defines who we are, and that's the core of our being, and so that informs and it influences everything else and everything else that we do as parents. And it impacts how we educate our kids, how we train them socially to interact with relationships and friends and all these sorts of things. And so how they grow physically and how to take care of themselves, and then emotionally, the emotional aspect of their lives. All of these things that we deal with on a daily basis is influenced and shaped by the fact that we love the Lord our God with all of our heart. And so we want our children to grow up and to do the same thing. So that's what we talked about last week, with beginning with the end in mind. And so today we're going to start with a principle, and it is fight for the heart. So principle number 2 is fight for the heart. In Proverbs 4:23, it says, "Guard your heart above all else, for it is the source of life." Guard your heart above all else, for it is the source of life. And so this is kind of a well-known passage. But if we're thinking about parenting, and we're going to apply this to parenting and to our kids, is yes, we should guard our hearts, but guess what? We also have to fight for the heart of our children. We have to guard their heart. We have to fight for their heart. And so the heart is kind of the control center of the person. And so in the scriptures, the heart and the soul, they're pretty much the same thing. They're synonymous. And so the heart, or the soul, is where our thoughts are. It's where our personality is. It's our desires, contains our desires and our wants and our dreams and all of those things that make us who you are. It is our core, our inner being. And so whenever we hear that word, the heart, in Scripture, that is what it's talking about, who you are at the core, your inner being. And so your heart, your child's heart, is the most important real estate that they have. And so we have to learn to fight for the heart. The heart is always active. It can draw closer to God, and it can drift away from God. Their heart can harden, but it can also soften. It can be full of faith, and it can be full of unbelief. The heart can be strong, and the heart can be weak. And then there are seasons of life where sometimes, your heart's in better shape than others, okay? So there's peaks and there's valleys. And so navigating all of these things and fighting for the heart of our kids is what we're going to talk about today. In fact, I'm going to give you 5 ways that we can fight for the heart. And the first one is that we need to understand that there is a fight for your child's heart. We have to fight for your child's heart because other people are fighting for their heart as well. Has anybody seen the documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma? Has anybody seen that? There are a few of you. If you haven't seen it, parents, Grandparents, adults, I highly recommend that you watch it. It's on Netflix. It's a documentary. And so basically what it is there's several people that they interview who were at the beginning stages of when social media was being created and being formed, and then when it started to take off. And so we're talking guys who were executives, guys who were part of the design process, tech guys from 10, 15 years ago. And we're talking Facebook, Google, YouTube, Instagram, the guy that created or invented virtual reality. So all of these important people who are immersed in that field, they are no longer in this field because they saw the dangers or things that were happening, and they left. And so they kind of came together to put this documentary together because they feel like everybody should know what's happening with social media. And so what is happening is that they have studied kind of our brain and how we function, and kind of the sociology of our brain and how we think and what makes us tick. And they've actually developed social media so that it would become addictive, so that you would constantly be driven to your phone or to an iPad or to a computer to get on social media. And so they have intentionally designed their products so that we would be addicted to it, so that we would want to stay on their product. Why? So that they could sell it to advertisers, so that they could make money. So they want you to be on social media as long as possible, because the longer you're on social media, the more ads that are going to be placed, the more money they're going to make. So at the end, you just follow the money, right? And so this is what they have designed. And so this is why they came out with notifications, because you get a notification on your phone and it's like, oh, I got to check this out. So you end up going on social media, right, more often throughout the day because you got this notification. And so they kind of go through and they kind of lay out how all of this was designed basically to get you addicted to social media. So then over time, they begin to realize, hey, this is having an effect on people. Like, we're able to manipulate people and their behaviors and their attitudes by what we post. And so what they have done is they have realized is that they can actually begin to change the way that you act, the way that you function, and get you to do things that normally you wouldn't do. And they do this, and they talk about this in the documentary, with small nudges. So what they do is, over the course of time, these small nudges that they expose you to on social media is designed to get you to do something. And so they use the example of they wanted to increase voter turnout during one of the election cycles. So they ran this social media campaign, and guess what? Sure enough, they were able to get a higher increase of percentage of people voting. And so they realized, hey, we can manipulate behavior and we can get people to do things that they normally wouldn't be able to do. So now all of this is written into their algorithms. And so we don't realize it, but we're slowly being manipulated by guys sitting behind a computer in a cubicle somewhere who are designing these algorithms. And they basically talk about this. So these tech guys, they begin to see negative effects. They saw it in their family, their kids, and in themselves. They started seeing it in statistics that were being reported. This is early on, 10, 15 years ago. And they begin to say, wait a minute, we need to change this. We're seeing negative effects, not positive effects. I mean, we're trying to get people to stay connected and improve relationships, but we're seeing the opposite kind of happen. And so they began to kind of raise the alarm within their own companies, and what did they get back? Nothing. They just continued on. So eventually they kind of left, and they're like, we're not going to be a part of this. And so it's very interesting. It's very frightening. And one of the frightening things that they share in this documentary is that in back 2010, 2013, as social media began to kind of skyrocket, guess what skyrocketed with it? Depression, anxiety, and suicides, especially amongst middle and high schoolers, middle schoolers and high schoolers. And so when you look at the graphs that they show, the graphs of the growth of social media and the growth of any kind of mental issue, mental illness, whether it's depression, anxiety, or whatever is going on, they are basically mirrored. So as social media was taken off, so were all of these things. And so we know, mental health in our society is an issue in our day and time. And why is that? A lot of that, I think, is because of social media. So they go through great detail. It's about an hour and a half, so I recommend you watch it if you haven't already. It's going to make you want to throw your iPhone and your iPad, your screens and everything just out the window. It's going to make you want to do that. But as parents, we have to be aware, we have to understand that there is a world out there, there are people out there that want to control your children, that they are fighting for the heart of your kids. And they want to control them. They want them to become part of the world and not be conformed to Christ. And it's happening at an alarming rate in all different kinds. And so we have to be aware of the enemy and his schemes. We have to be aware of the world. We have to be aware of friends and what they're doing and what they're watching. Because we have to understand that there is a fight that is happening for the heart of your child. So therefore, we have to fight for the heart of our kids. And the problem is, and what makes this difficult, is because of our sin nature, we are all born with a natural inclination to join up and to partner with the ways of the world, to go that route, because we just think that that's going to bring us happiness. But really, that happiness is only very short term, isn't it? But we naturally want to go with the way of the world. And so we have to fight that. We have to fight for the heart of our kids because other people are fighting for us. So number 2, the second way that we can fight for the heart is we need to seek to understand the heart issues behind behavior. Seek to understand the heart issues behind behavior. Luke chapter 6, 43 through 45, our Lord Jesus says this. He says, "A good tree doesn't produce bad fruit. On the other hand, a bad tree doesn't produce good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. Figs are gathered from the thorn bushes, or grapes picked from a bramble bush. A good person produces good out of the good that is stored up in his heart. An evil person produces evil out of the evil stored up in his heart. For his mouth speaks from the overflow of his heart." All right, so here we've heard this analogy many times. This is a very famous passage, but basically Jesus is saying, listen, you will know someone by their fruit. And where does their fruit come from? From what is stored up within your heart. So heart determines behavior. So if you have a good heart, you have good things that are stored up in your heart, then it's going to produce good behavior, godly behavior. But if there are some bad things that are stored up in your heart, then what is that going to produce? It's going to produce bad behavior. So as parents, we've got to understand that when our kids act out and they're behaving poorly, we've got to ask why. Because that's indicating that there is a heart issue. But what is our tendency? Our tendency is just to treat or to correct the behavior. It's kind of like this. Say your kid is sick with strep throat. You can do one of two things. You can give them medicine to treat the symptoms, or you can take them to the doctor so they can get an antibiotic. And the antibiotic's going to kill the sickness, right? It's going to kill the strep throat, make it go away. And so parenting is the same way. Is we can correct the behavior, but we're not necessarily correcting the heart issue. Or we can get to the heart of the issue, what's causing the bad behavior, and try to correct that and work with our child in that area. But oftentimes, and why do we do this? I think it's because sometimes it's just the easiest thing to do. You're busy, you're in the middle of something, and your kids start fussing and fighting. It's like the last thing you need to do is sit down and deal with it. So what do? We just want to quickly correct their behavior, right? But sometimes we just have to stop and we have to consider that there are heart issues behind what's going on in their behavior. And so we've got to realize behavior starts in the heart, whether it's good or whether it's bad. So obviously, poor behavior is an indicator to us as parents that there is something wrong with the heart, that there is a heart issue. So what is going on? I want to give you just a few common issues of the heart. Now, it might be different for every household, for every kid. There might be different issues, but I want to give you just some common issues, some bad seeds, so to speak, that could be planted in your child's heart that could produce bad behavior. So the first one is selfishness. Selfishness. And this is kind of what defines being a child, right? Is, I want what's mine, and I want what I want, and what I need and what I want is more important than what you need and what you want. And so that's just kind of how kids act. And so that kind of describes a child. And so hopefully as children age and they get older, hopefully by the time they're in high school, they're becoming less and less selfish. But this is something that describes kids. And this is a common thing that's in the heart of a child that can produce bad behavior. You get two kids that are fussing over a toy, fighting over a toy. I had it first. No, I had it first. And then they're fussing and fighting. Well, what's at the heart of the fussing and fighting? Well, a lot of times it's just pure selfishness, isn't it? And so that's what's at the heart. So we got to understand we can't just correct the behavior. We've got to look deeper and get to the heart of the issue, the selfishness. Number 2 is guilt. Is guilt. A lot of times, kids, whether it's real or it's imagined, they can harbor this kind of guilt that they've done something wrong. And they won't let it go. And so that can cause them to kind of withdraw from relationships or from people and just kind of feel bad about themselves. And so if this guilt isn't dealt with, or they haven't forgiven themselves, or somebody else hasn't forgiven them, this guilt remains. It can have long-term effects. And so guilt can impact their behavior. Number 3 is pain or hurt. Somebody's offended them, hurt their feelings. Okay? Or maybe, they lost a friend, or there's a million things that could happen, but some sort of pain or hurt, especially if kids are lashing out in anger, we should ask ourselves, why? Because a lot of times, they're hurt. Somebody's hurt their feelings. And the only way they know how to deal with it is just expresses itself in anger. So anger is an indication that, look, there's a heart issue. We need to find out what's going on in the heart. And a lot of times it could be what? Pain or hurt. Number 4 is just envy, greed, lust. And this is just an intense desire to want something. And this can happen to all of us, but especially in kids. They get their heart set on something. They really want something bad, and they just won't let it go. And they're going to do whatever it takes to get whatever it is they want. They will disobey you. They will break, house rules. They'll do whatever it takes. They'll even break the law, if they need to. But sometimes just this intense desire to want something just causes bad behavior. And we learned about this in James just, not too long ago. James chapter 4, verse 1 and 2. It says, "What is the source of wars and fights among you? Don't they come from your passions that wage war within you? You desire and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and wage war." So why does James say all the fussing and fighting is happening among you? It's because you want things. You have this craving, this inner desire. And it's not being satisfied. So you end up lashing out, or you end up breaking the law, or you end up being disobedient to parents. And so it produces bad behavior if that appetite is not curbed. They don't learn how to have self-control. So this is a seed that can bring poor behavior. Number 5 is jealousy. Jealousy, this is resentment towards someone because of something they have. And this is kind of akin to having envy and greed, is you want something and then you find out, they have it. You want these special pair of shoes. These shoes came out. Mom and Dad say, they're too much. We're going to wait till they go on sale, or we're going to do this. Then you go to school and you see what? You see other people wearing them. And so this jealousy can just creep up in a child's heart. But why is it there? What's causing the bad behavior? It's a heart issue, right? The last thing is fear. Fear paralyzes us, doesn't it? In kids, fear is a big deal because they are afraid of things. And fear can keep them from moving forward. It can keep them from growing and learning and understanding. And so all of these things, these are seeds that can produce bad fruit trees. So if these seeds that are in your child's heart, if they are allowed to stay there, they will grow. Because the heart of a child is fertile. The heart of a child is fertile. Whatever is planted there will grow. Why? Because they're ignorant. They're ignorant of the world, they're ignorant of what's good and what's bad, and so they kind of have to be taught things. And so if bad seeds are planted, guess what's going to grow? Bad fruit trees. So we have to, when we see bad behavior in our children, we don't just need to correct the behavior, but we got to find out, hey, what's going on underneath? What's going on the inside that's causing that? Because there are heart issues that need to be resolved, that need to be figured out, that we need to talk with our kids about and work with them through, so that these seeds won't become fruit trees, if that makes sense. So how can we discover what's going on in your heart? And that's number 3, is we need to discover heart issues by asking questions. Discover heart issues by asking questions. And I think this is very important to think about, because many times, and I'm guilty of this, and maybe you are as well, but what do we want to do? We want to speak into our kids. We want to tell them what to do. We just want to tell them and expect that they get it and it's going to work and it's going to change. And there's a time and a place when we do that, where we speak into our kids and we teach them and we coach them. But there's a time when we have to draw out of them what's going on in their heart. Listen to Proverbs 20, verse 5. It says, "Counsel in a person's heart is deep water, but a person of understanding draws it out." And whenever we hear this word understanding, think wisdom, because it's part of wisdom. So if you're going to be a wise parent is going to understand that, yes, there are going to be times when I need to speak into my children and teach them. But there are going to be times when I need to ask questions, because I need to understand what's going on in their heart, and I've got to draw that out. And how are we going to draw that out? How are we going to do that? How can we draw out what's going on in the heart? Well, we have to ask the right questions at the right time with the right tone. That's how we do it. We got to ask the right questions at the right time with the right tone. Now, we have to ask the right questions. Now, you can ask simple yes or no questions, and you're not going to get very far. So asking the right questions tend to be just open-ended questions, where it's not just a simple yes, it's not just a simple no. And so questions like, what do you think about this? Just an open-ended, where they have to explain what's going on in their head, what's going on, why are they thinking this way? And so we have to learn to ask the right questions. And we've got to do it at the right time. We can ask the right question, but we can do it at the wrong time, can't we? So if you got two kids and they're in the middle of the fight and they're arguing and they're all upset, it may not be the best time to sit down and start asking questions. They may not be ready just yet. And maybe you give them a few minutes to kind of cool down, settle down, and then you come back in a few minutes and you can start asking questions about what happened. So we've got to think about what is the right time. Proverbs 15:23 says, "A person takes joy in giving an answer, and a timely word, how good that is." And so again, wisdom from Solomon teaches us that, listen, there is a right time to ask questions and there's a wrong time. So learning, navigating the situations and the circumstances that happen throughout the day, and knowing, all right, when is a good time to ask questions? Now, we don't have to wait till there's a conflict to ask questions. In fact, sometimes the best time to ask questions is when everything's going good, when there are no conflicts between you and a child or between kids. In fact, what I have found is that sometimes the best time to ask a question is when you're sitting around the dinner table eating. There's no conflict, everything's going on, and you can just open up conversation by asking, "Hey, how was your day?" And then you can begin to ask some questions, find out, hey, what's going on inside of their heart? What's going on the inside? So we got to ask the right questions at the right time, but with the right tone. With the right tone. If our kids feel like they're being interrogated, they're going to be less likely to open up, aren't they? They're probably going to close down. Now, there's a time when they probably need to be interrogated, depending on what they've done. So there may be a time when that's appropriate. But most of the time, if you can have a conversation and you're calm and you're not yelling, you're not screaming, you're not upset, they're going to be more likely to open up and to share what's going on the inside. But asking questions with the right tone will go a long way in drawing out what is going on deep inside of our kids. So that's number 3, is that we have to discover heart issues by asking questions. Asking questions. Number 4 is we have to plant good seeds that will grow into good fruit trees. We have to plant good seeds that will grow into fruit trees. All right? So what do I mean by that? Well, we have to intentionally begin to plant seeds, good things, godly things that will lead to godly character. We have to be intentional about that. So one of the things is serving. We have to teach our kids to serve, where they're not going to get any kind of benefit out of it. They're not going to be paid for it, but they're just doing it to help somebody out. We have to teach kids to do that. And what's going to come from that is they're going to learn humility. They're going to learn love, to love people, and to do things without expecting anything in return. And so we have to teach our kids. And one of the ways that we can do that is just by simply getting them to serve, getting them to work. We've got to teach them forgiveness. We got to teach them forgiveness. They got to learn how to forgive. They got to learn to forgive themselves, learn to forgive other people as well. We got to teach them patience, don't we? Otherwise, that greed, that envy, it's going to come out. It's going to be bad. They got to learn patience. They got to wait for the things that they want. And they got to learn that sometimes waiting is better than trying to get everything right now. We live in a microwave society, don't we, where we want everything right now. And we've got to teach our children patience. We got to teach them to give and to share. And these are going to combat, and this is going to help keep from bad seeds forming. If they learn how to give and they learn how to share, these are good things that we have to teach our kids, is to give and to share with each other and to share with others. And that'll help develop generosity, which was, a hallmark of Jesus, and the fact that He gave out of love for us. He gave His life, right? So He was a giver. He was generous. And so we need to be the same way. We need to teach our kids to be generous and share. And so whatever else is going to develop character, Christ-like character in our kids' life, we need to be proactive and be thinking, what are some things that I can do to help plant seeds that will eventually grow and yield good, healthy fruit trees? What can I do to do that? What can I do? So we have to be proactive, and we have to look ahead, and we have to say, you know what? I need to proactively plant seeds, good godly seeds that will yield. And it may take time, right? It may take time, but it may yield fruit trees in the future. Now we can't make, we can't make our kids grow, but we can plant seeds, right? And we can plant seeds, and we can work on that as parents, is planting seeds, serving, teaching them forgiveness, patience, giving, and sharing to develop good, godly Christian character that will hopefully one day, when they're older, when they're an adult, it will blossom and it'll be full bloom, and we'll be able to see the fruit of our labor, so to speak. All right, so number 5 is this. The 5th way is make sure your kids know that you are for them and not against them. Make sure your kids know that you are for them and not against them. What do I mean by that? Well, kids sometimes mistake discipline as though you are against them. Whether, you mean to communicate that or not, sometimes kids, they misconstrue discipline and to think, oh, my mom or dad doesn't like me anymore. They don't want me around, or they don't want this. And so sometimes they can misunderstand discipline. Now, don't get me wrong. We need to discipline our kids, and we're going to get to that in a couple weeks, all right? So we need to discipline our kids. It's very important that we do that. But we also, in the midst of that, we need to communicate well as why we discipline. Because a father who loves his children will discipline. So we have to communicate love, and even in the midst of discipline. Now, you may be mad as a hornet with what your child has done, and probably rightly so. But in the midst of that, we have to make sure that they know that you love them and that you are for them and not against them, because they can easily misconstrue that discipline. And they can begin to think, whether it's right or wrong, they can begin to think, hey, my parents don't want me around. They're not for me. They're against me. And this is easily done in the mind of a child. So we have to communicate that we are for them, and we're doing this for their benefit. Another way that we can make sure their kids know that you are for them, and we can kind of capture their heart, is simply to play with them. Now, play with your kids looks different when they're 4 than when they're 16. So that's going to change over time. But playing with your kids communicates that you love them, that you care about them. And it's an opportunity for you to connect with them at the heart level. Not just a head level, but at the heart level. And to develop that relationship. And actually, if you think about it as like a bank account, to make some deposits into that relationship. And that you can play with them. And it means a big deal when mom or dad plays with them. Now, when they get a little older, it may become uncool, so you might have to be, a little strategic about how you do that as they get older and they become teenagers, right? But play. What does that look like? Is it playing, just a board game? Is it playing, a card game? Is it playing a video game? Whatever it is, whatever your child likes, there are times where you just simply need to play with them, and it will connect with them on the heart level, and it will let them know, hey, Mom and Dad, they do love me. They do care about me. They are for me. They want my best. It communicates all of these things. And so all of this is very difficult to do, to fight for the heart. And why is that? Jeremiah 17:9, it says this, the heart is more deceitful than anything else and incurable. Who can understand it? Who can understand it? So listen, we're all going to mess up. We're all going to mess up in our fight for the heart. Sometimes we're going to mess up and we're going to say things and we're going to do things that we shouldn't as parents because we're going to get angry because we got our own heart issues we're dealing with, right? Can I get an amen with that? We have our own heart issues. We're going to mess up and we're going to push our kids away. And when we do that, what do we got to do? We got to go back and we got to apologize and we got to pull them back in, don't we? We got to reel them back in. Because if we keep messing up and we never apologize and we never pull them back in, we're just going to keep pushing them away, and we're going to mess up. And fighting for the heart is difficult. It's not going to be easy. There are going to be seasons of life where maybe it is easier, and then there are going to be seasons where it's going to be hard. It's going to be like trying to, talk to a brick wall. Especially when kids hit that middle school, early high school age. It's just a difficult age. And so it's going to be tough. But understand it's not forever, that there are seasons. Your kids are going to go through seasons where fighting for the heart is going to be easier, and there are going to be seasons where it is tougher. But what do? We don't give up. We don't give up. We keep on. You keep fighting through whatever the difficulty is. But it's going to be difficult. Why? Because the heart is deceitful. It's hard to understand. It's a mystery sometimes to find out what's going on in our own heart, much less know what's going on in a child's heart. And so this is going to take time. It's going to take years, but it's an effort that we have to engage in. We have to fight for the heart. So if we want to be a disciple-making parent, we want our kids to grow up and know the Lord and love the Lord, we have to fight for the heart. So I have a book recommendation. It's called Shepherding a Child's Heart. It's written by Ted Tripp, and it's really good. It's got some practical things in there. And so if you don't have it, you haven't read it, you can buy it on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. You can get the actual handheld paperback if you want. But this is something that I recommend, for parents. Make sure you have, and there'll be a couple other resources that I'll recommend as we go through this series. But make sure you have this book. It's one that I highly recommend, and it'll help guide you and coach you in more practical detail on how we can fight for the heart, how we can shepherd a child's heart so that we lead them and guide them to the Lord, and we don't allow them to drift away from the Lord. And so we got to fight for the heart. We got to fight for our kids' heart, because if we don't, the world is going to win their heart. It's going to woo them over. And we got to be aware of what's going on in the world and understanding that there are all kinds of traps that the world has set to pull them away from you, pull them away from the Lord, and into what they're doing and into the schemes. So we have to fight for the heart. So next week's Father's Day, and next week we're going to talk about a dad who leads. So I hope you'll come back and join us then. Let's pray.